This is Heather Stephen, and you're listening to Pieces to Peace, Anchoring on the Other Side of Grief. This podcast focuses on people who have emerged from the depths of their grief, their transition from surviving the darkest of days to seeing the light again. Through my own experiences of grief, I have learned how healing it is to know that I am not alone. My hope is that those seeking comfort and relief will find some here and leave feeling reassured that there is life again. There are brighter days ahead, just around the corner. All right, so I'm here with my sister-in-law, Juliette today. I'm super excited because we haven't done a live recording yet, and you're my first one for that, so that'll be good.
All right, let's
She has a unique story. May not be death related, but still pretty tragic. And I'm just excited for her to tell her story. So can you maybe just give us the background a little bit on you and then just go into your story?
So I'm a fourth generation Nevadan, and I'm the youngest of four children. I was raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I was raised in the back of a costume store. My mother owned a costume shop, and I was about 2 years old. She had me very late in life. And so that's kind of where I grew up, with a very diverse and unique history and background with that.
I didn't know that. Okay, so
Yes.
I'll be learning some things.
Yes.
Too. Okay.
And so she started her business with 10 costumes and $2,000 that she earned from babysitting. My father had cancer, and she felt like she really needed to do something to be able to support herself and me, being kind of the youngest, but also almost like an only child. As I grew, I did have both my parents, and my father owned a dry cleaners in Las Vegas as well. I happened to marry my high school sweetheart. We both went to a local high school. He was the football star. I was the cheerleader. And only a couple months into our very high school relationship, I found out I was pregnant. I was a junior in high school, and he was a senior. He graduated high school, and I left my junior year, took my GED. We got married. I was 17. He was 18 years old. And that's where we started our family.
Wow. Okay. So then what happened? Where'd you go? Did you stay here?
No. So my first husband, he played baseball, and he was on a scholarship in Cedar City, Utah at SUU. I continued to work on my education as well. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education. We just continued to build our family. When I graduated from college, I had three children and was pregnant with one. So that was really difficult. He was on the baseball team, so they traveled all the time. So I was pretty much alone with my three children, pregnant. But my mother and my grandmother were very adamant that I finish my education, because you kind of didn't know when you were going to need it. So
Smart.
I definitely decided that I wanted to finish. I put that degree in my pocket and kind of didn't pull it out for basically decades. My ex-husband was very good at sales, and he started working for a telemarketing company. And he saw how good the money was, and he started his own company there in Cedar City. Him and his partner broke apart. We moved to St. George, Utah, and that's where everything really started to fall apart.
Okay, so I didn't realize, so you got your degree in Cedar City?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't realize that either.
Yeah.
All right, so then you went to St. George, and then you had four by then.
I had four when we moved there.
Okay.
And we broke off. He opened from the original business of doing telemarketing. We broke off from that. He started another company in St. George, Utah, and we moved our family to St. George. At the time, he was running his own call center. So at that time, there was a lot of telemarketing going on. And he really wanted us to have this amazing home and everything. I will say, at the time that we bought this ginormous home, it was the biggest home in St. George, Utah at the time. It felt like too much. And I remember questioning it, this seems like a lot. This is a really big house. And I remember him saying something like, well, I'm doing this for you, kind of situation. And so I just went along with it. In the meantime, we had another child. So I was now at 5. And his business was running smoothly. Everything was going good. I was home raising the kids most days. And we did have all the nice things in life. I had a nanny helping me on occasion. We traveled. It was just kind of the perfect story that these two high school sweethearts were going to make it, and we were going to make it big.
Yeah. So was your house in the Parade of Homes?
My house was not in the Parade of Homes at the time, but it was it was a spectacle. It really like stood out. Those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, for sure. So, things were going smooth and everything was going well. And I was home with my fifth child. He was just a newborn. And the day that everything really hit the fan was just kind of one of those days that you just remember every little detail. So my ex-husband was out of town. I got a phone call from him that morning, and he said, "Don't go into the office. Something's going on." And that was all the information I got. Looking back now, I realized what was happening. His office was being raided by the U.S. Marshals and the Federal Trade Commission. I continued my day. One thing I've always really been good at is just moving forward and just keep going along as though nothing's happening. And that afternoon, I had a Boy Scout meeting planned. And I just recall this so clearly. I had all these mothers dropping off their little boys to do our lesson. And ironically, it was on the federal government and how their government runs. And all the moms drop their kids off. They start pulling out of we had this big giant driveway with gates with our initials on them. And here comes all these black Suburbans and SUVs. And I just remember looking out the window and just feeling calm. Like there was nothing I could really do. So federal agents came, they busted in my door. They held me at gunpoint in front of all these little children. I asked if they could just let these kids at least go outside. They finally did let them go. And the federal agents just ravaged my home. Everything was turned over. Every drawer was emptied. Every computer was seized. And you have to remember, this is early 2000s. And so not a lot was being done on computers at that time. I might have had a flip phone.
Right.
And so they went through my house. What they were looking for was a machine that prints or makes credit cards. Finding out later, they thought that my ex-husband was making illegitimate credit cards. That turned out to not be the case. I didn't know what they were looking for. I kept asking them, if you just tell me what you're looking for, I will find it for you and give it to you.
Were they communicating with you much?
They weren't communicating with me much. They would ask me a lot of questions. They were trying to get information. And I was home with 5 kids. I had zero information other than my husband at the time is out of town. There's nothing you can get here.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that's where that takes off.
When your husband called you and said something's going on, did you ask any questions like what is going on, or you just were like, all right, I'm not going in, I'm going to go throughout my day?
I was raised in a home where you kind of just didn't question the authority, and very traditional. I'm still very traditional in most of my beliefs, and I just didn't ask questions. I just did what I was told. I think that also stems from being married so young. I was 17, went from my parents' home into a marriage, and I just never questioned that he would ever steer me wrong. I just never thought he would steer me wrong.
Okay, so then when you said you felt so calm when they were driving up, did you make that connection that they were there and that might have been what was going on at the office that day?
Yes, definitely. I kept looking out the window all day, wondering if they were going to come to our home. Okay. And so I knew it had been raided. It was ironic that he was out of town. And so, of course, it was like all on my plate.
Right.
After the federal prosecutors left, I just remember the house being quiet. I went to bed that night. I didn't sleep much. My ex-husband's still out of town. The next morning at like 5 a.m., I'm up super early. I hear that newspaper hit my front porch. And I go and I open the door, and there's our home on the front porch, on the front page of the newspaper there. It was big news. It was local news as well as national news. I will say that morning, I also had a really unique situation. I had 2 friends of mine from my church. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and 2 women showed up. They were my visiting teachers. They kind of you're assigned to check on various sisters. And I remember not wanting to open the door because I just felt this sense of humiliation, embarrassment. I didn't even know what was going on. There was a lot of questions at that time. So I did open the door and I started to try to explain what was happening, even though I really didn't have the words or the capacity at that time. And they said, "We don't care what's going on. We just wanted you to know that we love you." And that really set the course for the way that I would handle things in the next decades to come. That very same day, I had a nail appointment and I thought, do I show up or do I go crawl back in bed and put the covers over my head? Because that's really what I wanted to do. Yeah. And in that moment, I kind of made my second decision that I will always show up. I will always confront whatever's put in front of me, and I will just show up and I will answer the questions that I can and just be bold in my presence.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. So then what happened after that?
So not a lot actually happened after that. It was quiet for quite some time. We did lose our big home. It got very personal. If anybody's ever been sued by the federal government, you know it gets very scrappy, very personal. It's very expensive to fight any kind of federal allegations. And so I lost my home. We were forced to move to Las Vegas and kind of start anew. I do remember packing up this massive house. It was probably 11,000 square feet or something. And I had myself and my sister, and we packed what we were allowed to take. The federal government took our sheets. They took my dishes. They took very personal items, almost out of like a vengeance, I guess, or like, we're going to stick it to you. So we packed up, my sister and I, a U-Haul by ourselves. I don't know where my ex-husband was. It just felt like whenever there was a big thing happening, he wasn't there. I was kind of always there handling the things.
Right.
And so we packed up the car. We moved to Las Vegas. We lived in his parents' home. They had bought a home. And so we were kind of living in this home momentarily. And he started another business here in Las Vegas.
Wow. Okay. Still with the unknown.
Still unknowns, but it was quiet. It was very quiet. There wasn't a lot done. Now at this time, unbeknownst to me, I was the owner of several businesses. And one thing I have learned in hindsight is just don't sign anything without reading it. But again, I've had many people ask me, how did you not know all this was going on? I was a young mother with several children who had hope and faith in my spouse. Right. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
So people question that, and you can question it all day long. I was just there. I was living this life that I actually loved, and everything was fine. During that time, I had my sixth child in Las Vegas. I ran for Mrs. Nevada. I won Mrs. Nevada. We were couple of the year. We were very kind of up and coming again. We kind of got back on our feet. Things were looking up. We moved into a new home that fit our family a little bit better. My kids were in a great school. Everything was going really well. After I won the pageant, I went to Mrs. United States. And during this time, this was 2006. So people were starting to find things online. They could look up things. And that's when I started getting what this was going to be like publicly. People were asking questions. She shouldn't have won because her husband's has this looming issue with the federal government. But I persevered through that. I went to Mrs. United States. I had a great time. But that was really hard because it was so public.
Right. So you always knew that there was this still behind you, or maybe even in front of you, not behind you. There was never a time where you thought, or that he even made you think like, this is done. Like we're good. No more issues.
He had a really great way of keeping it from me. He was very compartmentalized. And I found that men can be this way, compartmentalized, so they can be doing something with their church that's totally different from their business, which is totally different from home. A little bit about our marriage. It was very compartmentalized. He told me what to do and how to do it and how to be. And I was totally okay with that. I just felt like he always had everything under control. Like, for example, it wasn't unusual to have a Christmas party and he would give every one of his employees a Rolex watch. That was very commonplace. so he showed as though he was giving all of these things, and he was very giving. I never realized how much money he actually made. I remember calling it. I was at Costco one day and I was like, is it okay if I buy this $300 worth of groceries? And I had thousands of dollars in my bank account and I didn't even realize that. I was still asking kind of permission to do the things that, you do. I just wouldn't buy things. So that's how that was. He opened his business. He was, back on track again. And there is a time limitation. So federal authorities have to bring indictments within 7 years of the initial time that the whole thing starts. And so it was about 6 years and 300 days. And a federal prosecutor that was very interested in pursuing this, he shopped the case around the country. So a little backstory again. If something was sold, so it was telemarketing, so it was across state lines, so that made it a federal case. So it's not a state crime. A state crime is something like a murder or drugs that don't cross state lines. If it crosses state lines or there's phone calls made across state lines, which in telemarketing that would be the case, then it's considered a federal crime. So he went all over the country, this federal prosecutor, and found a judge that would take it in the District of East St. Louis, which is a little district. This part of St. Louis looks almost like a war just happened. There's kind of piles of burning rubble and whatnot. And so he had sold one of his products there. And that's where this really started to fall apart once again.
Okay. And so that you had all six kids.
Yes.
About how old was your youngest at that point?
My youngest was 2 and my oldest was 12.
Okay. All right.
So I had them about every 2 years.
Yep.
So this indictment hit and we had some very unusual things happen with various prosecutors, how they would do things. And it's a very complicated case. Even I recently wrote a book, a manuscript, and I had to reread all of the court documents just to remember because it was so complicated.
Yeah.
So we had to go to trial in the District of East St. Louis. And my ex-husband had paid a retainer fee to various attorneys, and the federal government would put the attorneys into jail. So we ended up with an attorney that usually prosecutes murderers. He wasn't like a technical computer.
Right.
And you have to remember, this is during President Bush was the president at the time. There was a huge push to dismantle telemarketing. There was do not call lists. There was federal lists being put together. This was also after 9/11. So people who used to pay cash for items now had to use some sort of a credit or debit card.
Sure.
So his programs offered debit cards, pay as you go. That was a new term at that time. Now you can load a card and that's very common. Mm-hmm. At that time, a lot of people didn't have a debit card. They would have to purchase a pay as you go card. So the federal government's idea was that he was preying on people with bad credit or people who couldn't maybe obtain a debit or credit card on their own. Okay. So we went to trial. We prepared. It cost about $1 million. Our family members put up their homes, cars, everything to pay the attorneys and all the fees. We moved our children there for the duration of the trial.
Which was how long?
It was about 3 weeks with a week intermittence in between.
Okay.
So we had hired a special ghost jury. They sit through the entire process and tell you how they think that they're going to make this go, how it's going to go.
Okay.
We hired people to help us when we were supposed to bring the kids in, when the jury's watching, certain times. So we had all our little kids. His mother, his sister and mother were both there, his father, everybody, and they helped take care of the kids while we were in court. One thing that I really, if anybody's ever been in a federal lawsuit or case in a courtroom, it's very stressful. There's a lot of the federal government has unbound resources. And one thing that I did to really maintain my mental health and everything at this time was I would go to the gym. Mm-hmm. And it was in this, like I said, District of East St. Louis. So it basically looked like a prison, this gym. I bet. And I remember my father-in-law at the time, it was a lunch break. And I said, I'm going to the gym. He's like, how can you go to the gym at a time like this? And I'm like, how can I not go to the gym at a time like this?
Yeah, different perspective for sure.
So take it to the end of this trial. he never took the stand. I never had to take the stand, nothing like that. But they had witnesses and all of this. The jury, they went out for deliberation, and we were out. I remember sitting in this old courthouse. It's like brick and mortar, like red brick. And we're sitting in this very dimly lit room with this nasty couch. It had like stains on it. And an earthquake happened. And like, it wasn't a chandelier. It was like an old light fixture started waving and the lights flickered. And the Mississippi River switched directions for a moment. So it was kind of this very epic, like unique moment that just is seared into my mind. And then the jury came back. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I thought, we're definitely going to win this. He's coming home. We can start again, all of that. The jury found him guilty. And because the sentence was going to be so high, and because they found that he was a flight risk, which is crazy because we had 6 little kids. Like, where are we going to go with 6 children, like, 2 to 12 years old. So at that moment, he was shackled, cuffed. They put him in a white van. And I just remember walking out of the courthouse and just saying, like, that was the last time he was ever free. And we were like married in that capacity. I had to tell his children, your dad's not coming home with us. And that is where I thought it would end. But it's where the story really just begins for the downfall of everything that was going to happen in the future.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so tell me how it was actually telling the kids was it the hotel or somewhere?
So we had rented a condo apartment type of a thing. And I don't recall exactly. I don't have a great memory. I'm pretty sure I didn't tell them. No, I did. I remember.
Okay.
I walked into the apartment. When's Daddy coming? Where's Daddy?
Right.
Daddy's not coming home. My sister-in-law said, I will take the kids back to Vegas. I remember my sister followed me into the apartment. I don't remember seeing the kids again that day or any time in that state. Mm-hmm. She came into my bedroom with me and she just held me. And I just remember like being in a fetal position and wailing, like that wailing, that like open mouth crying. Yeah. For I don't know how long. And I remember at that moment, I walked into the closet and there was all his clothes. And he was an immaculate dresser. He had beautiful shoes and beautiful clothing and the smell of them. And I remember getting on my knees. And it's the first time I could always say like I was a spiritual or religious person. I was very good at being in an organization. Mm-hmm. But in that moment, I just fell to my knees. And I remember looking at the clock, and every 30 seconds, I would pray that I could live for 30 more seconds. And I did that for hours. I don't even know how long. But that was the point when I like felt that glass just falling out from under me. And the only place to go was on my knees and pray, like, I can't live through the next 30 seconds because my whole world just was evaporated in one moment.
Oh my goodness. Like, I cannot imagine. Okay. And thank goodness your sister was there though, to hold you. I mean, I find that stuff is so important to have.
And we're not touchers or huggers or criers. Really? Like, I mean, in the last 2 years, I've probably cried twice and probably one was in a movie. Like, right. It's very rare.
Yeah.
So at that point,
did it feel like a death? Did it feel like
that? You opened this saying it's not a death.
Yeah.
One thing about somebody incarcerated, there's 1 in 4 people in the country incarcerated, which a lot of kids, a lot of family members have this going on in their life. It might be a grandpa, it might be an uncle, it might be a parent, it might be a sibling. And one thing that I've heard over and over, because I've worked a lot with families of incarcerated, mm-hmm. Loved ones, and they all say it's like having a death over and over again. So the person disappears. It's like they're in purgatory. It's like mm-hmm. they're in a space where they're still on earth, but they haven't descended. Right. They haven't transcended yet. And so every time my kids would visit their father in prison, it felt like a funeral every single time. So to say that prison is like death, I understand death. I've mm-hmm. had nephews die. I've had nieces die. I've had loved ones. I haven't had a child die. Right. But I had a husband feel as though he died. Right. Yes. So that moment, he stayed there. I did go visit him in the the local jail before he was transferred. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting on the airplane to go home. And the stewardess asked my sister, is she okay? Her face is completely disfigured. So I must have looked, I can't imagine what a disfigure, like it was morbid. It was like twisted, really? Like my face was twisted. I remember coming home and not really knowing what to do from there. At that point, I did have a home. I had a car. We did have an operating business at home still that was in my name. And my kids were in a very good school. And so I still had all these things kind of going for me. The first thing that I did was remember that time at the nail salon. Like, I have to go and I have to show up.
Right. Okay.
So I went to church that Sunday. I got home on like a Friday. I called a bishop's like a pastor. Mm-hmm. And I said, he was a brand new bishop. Oh. And I said, my husband at the time just went to prison. I don't know how this is going to be. Right. And so I went to church that Sunday. I asked to have a minute with the men's group. Mm-hmm. And I stood up and I said, my husband's in prison. If anybody has any questions, just direct them to me because I probably know more than your neighbor. Right, and right. I just at that moment kind of took the tails of it and just grabbed on. Yeah. I went into the women's and I said, what I need is love and support. I don't need, gossip. I don't need that. And if you really want to know the answer, just call me and I'll tell you if I know the answer.
Right.
And so that really kind of set the trajectory of how I was going to handle this situation at this point.
Right. And I'm sure if you had been in that ward a while, they knew that you would just be totally transparent, open.
Yes. And that was kind of that moment when I became that way. Mm-hmm. So over this time, now there's a sentencing hearing. Now there's appeals. There's all these things that you start. So now you prepare for sentencing. So like in movies, you get a sentencing the same day. That's right. Not how it works, at least in federal court. So he's taken about 6 weeks or 2 months later, I go back to St. Louis to hear the sentencing. So he was handed the highest sentence for white collar crime in U.S. history besides Bernie Madoff. So he was like in Forbes for the highest sentence for white collar crime. They were really trying to make a example of him.
Right.
So there was really at that point, 33 years is a life sentence. It's considered a life sentence. So he was going to the highest security prisons in all over the country. The Bureau of Prisons says that they try to keep family members within so you can travel to see them, mm-hmm. but that's not true. I traveled to see him in Northern California a couple times, mm-hmm. and my children were taken all over the country by their grandparents to visit their father.
Because they just keep transferring?
They transfer. So if there's any kind of uprising or they feel that somebody might be dangerous or somebody's getting too comfortable, and they move them. So prisoners are always being moved around the country.
Okay.
And you don't know where they're going. Right. So once they're moved, you have to wait like a week or something to hear from them.
Okay. So you said that you went a couple of times, but your kids, at what point did you decide I can't wait for him, or the marriage was ending?
So our marriage had been a young love type of a marriage. It was a difficult marriage, but as good as teenagers and early 20s can be. Right? Sure. So I thought it was great. I thought we were having this great marriage. And right after he was sentenced, I went into my bishop's office and I said, what am I supposed to do? He's in prison for 30 years, but in our religion, we believe that you're sealed to somebody forever, for eternity. And he just kind of kept putting his head down and saying like, well, just think about it, just get through it. So for a year after his incarceration, I continued to be a good wife. I visited him. I wrote letters. I lobbied people and everything I could do. And just to keep the kids going, to keep the kids alive. And about a year into his incarceration, I was really struggling with this. And my bishop at that time asked the next time he called, to ask if he has any moral issues that he needs to clear up with me. So it was a Sunday. He called that night. I said, do you have any moral issues? He said, yes. The floodgates opened. He told me about several indiscretions. And at that point, I knew that was a blessing in a way because it gave me an out. Right. That might sound horrible, but no. I didn't know how to leave this without looking like a horrible person.
Did it come as a surprise to you, or did you ever suspect that?
I suspected it.
Okay.
Like I said, we had rocky times in the past. And so it was a surprise, but I had suspected it. But since he had been in prison, I hadn't. However, before we left for trial, he had gone into the bishop, disclosed the issues, and the bishop said, when you get home, we will talk about these things and we'll handle it. Mm-hmm. Nobody assumed he was going to prison for life.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, right.
So I filed for divorce the next day.
Wow.
And I knew at that point that that's kind of what had to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's all going on. We have a home. At the time, we had a place in Hawaii where he was actually from. I was in Hawaii. I get a phone call. I'm there with my children. It's a federal prosecutor, and they were going to be suing me and indicting me because my name was on several businesses.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Okay. So they said, we are the Federal Trade Commission. We are going to basically turn your life upside down. And they said, you need to be in court tomorrow. I said, I'm in Hawaii with 6 children. And they froze all my credit cards at that time. Everything was frozen. I had to have family members get me back to Las Vegas with my kids. And this started kind of the next shattering of that floor, because every time I would get on a plane where I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Right.
I had to I just kept sinking below.
Yeah.
At this time, the business that had my name on it was raided. Everything was frozen again. And everything that was now existing, the home, the cars, the bank accounts were all frozen again. So this is the second time this is happening. I have to come home. I have to find a lawyer. I have no money. Everything's frozen. I went and interviewed with several lawyers, and one specific attorney was a Federal Trade Commission attorney. And he took my case for a really low price, in a sense. And he represented me. And had he not represented me, I probably would have gone to prison as well.
Are you serious? Wow.
So during this time, I'm losing everything again. I'm personal training, because I would try to get a job and people would say, oh, we looked you up. We saw what happened. We can't hire you, but tell us about what happened.
Right.
There's a lot of looky-loos.
Oh, I'm
which
sure.
I get. I get.
Mm-hmm.
So, back up a little bit. I was in Hawaii and I was working out at the gym. One thing I never miss is a workout. I am faithful and steadfast in my workouts.
That's
and
awesome.
You do not mess with my time.
Right,
That's my time. Right. And so I had met Dog the Bounty Hunter. And I was working on the same kind of gym floor, and he comes up to me and he's like, how did you learn to lift like that? And I was like, A, B, and C. And I said, you tell me something. How did you make money off of what you were doing?
Yeah.
And he said, I told him my story, and he said, go home, become a personal trainer, and call me in a year. That's what he said. So I went home, I got my certification. I had worked with some of the best trainers in the business, and was able to get a little bit of a clientele. I worked out of a casita style gym. So I was able to work during the day, and that's how I was supporting my family at this time.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So then what did you do?
At that point, everything started to go really fast downhill. So for example, I'd pull up in my car outside my house. I'd run in to get something, and they would come and repossess the car. The house just went. My house just was in complete disorder, and it was a mess, and it was just full of sadness. And I had this nanny. She was actually my therapist at the time's daughter, and she came and worked in. She said, I can't go. She told her mother, I can't go back again. That house is full of sadness. It's too sad there. And during this time, I had a couple opportunities just where I always try to find those moments where I was testified to by our Heavenly Father.
Right.
And one day I had been at work, and some ladies in my ward had come and helped pack my house. And I remember walking in, and for the first time in many months, maybe a year, I could feel a spirit of angels.
Mm.
And I was like, angels have been here to do this. So I was being, talked to by the feds. I had this fabulous attorney. And I remember sitting in a deposition, and they kept asking me, like, where's the money hidden? For some reason, they thought there was like, I was like, do you think I'd be sitting here talking to you if there was millions of dollars?
Right,
like, no.
right.
And then they asked, how did you afford a Rolls Royce of an attorney? And I didn't realize he's one of the top attorneys in the country for Federal Trade Commission.
Oh.
And he said, you don't worry about how she's paying for me. You just worry about ending this. So I did end up settling.
Mm-hmm.
I admitted no wrongdoing. And at this time, I was living in different people's homes with my children. I was on food stamps. I spent a lot of time at the welfare office. And everything just led to something else. So, for example, I went to get food stamps, and the welfare police came because they're like, you have all these accounts with all this money. Why are we giving you food stamps? So I'm like, sit down. I'm going to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
So there was just constant things like this happening. During this time, my sister's son committed suicide. My son was on a mission for our church. He ended up it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Mm-hmm. He was given a lot of responsibility after his dad went to prison, and it was just too much. And my nephew was his best friend. So there was a lot of other things happening during this time. And I also started to date.
But I mean, you're trying to keep 6 kids afloat and keep yourself afloat, keep your finances afloat, keep yourself out of prison. How were you doing that with your kids, especially when the nanny says that house is so sad and you felt that? How were you even keeping your kids and yourself afloat?
So one thing, the nanny kind of dwindled just because there was no finances for that anymore. I had a lot of family help, a lot of church support
Mm-hmm.
with people. For me, I showed up every week to church, and I'd always walk to the front bench because at that point I was crying a lot. Every Sunday I was just sobbing. It was just horrible. I was actually quite neglectful to my children at that time. It was just fight or flight all the time. Right. And just keeping them alive was kind of all I could do.
Right.
And it was really stressful for them. Looking back, hindsight, I didn't do a great job with it. And I know that, and that's okay.
Yeah, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yes. So I was starting to date now. I had, been divorced for about it. My ex-husband had been in prison for about a year. It took about that long for the divorce. Mm-hmm. And like a divorce like that's very unusual because it's like they can't pay child support.
Right.
There's no assets to split because he has nothing.
Right.
We have nothing left. And it was just very a difficult time like that. Yeah. So I started to date. I thought it was going to be a prize for somebody. It was like, here I am, take me.
Right.
It was not a prize. I had 6 children with no financial support and the federal government after me. And so I did date a few people, and one happens to be your brother.
Oh, okay.
I know, I like you. So he was actually set up on a date from your ex-husband.
Right.
So my sister had asked her realtor, who had been her ex-husband, if he could do anything for her. And she said, sell my house and find my sister a husband. And so Stephen's story is my brother-in-law called me, said he needed a favor, but the catch was she has 6 kids and an ex-husband in prison. So he did come take me out. He called me that day, and I knew once I heard his voice that I would be married to him.
Really?
I knew it. In that moment, I knew. So he comes to pick me up. We had our first date. I had also had this series of my kids like slamming doors in people's faces. Like they still wanted their dad to be their dad. Yeah. So anyone who's been through any kind of divorce knows whether they're incarcerated or not. I did have my kids full time, obviously. Yeah. And throughout this period of time, I was moving from home to home, borrowing people's cars, using those food stamps, getting food orders from the church. Like I was really bottom of the barrel, and I was working. I was living on medication to sleep, to stay awake, to manage my anxiety and stress. Yep. When I met my current husband, I was having a lot of medical issues in the hospital. I had just been in fight or flight for so long that my adrenal glands had completely given out. And so my husband now and I were a great match. However, we had a really hard time getting it together. So the first time we got married, he moved into my house. And it was a very difficult transition. I had all of my ex-husband's clothes still there, all his suits, all his belts, pictures, photos. Like, where do you go if someone's not dead, but they're in prison, but you have all their stuff?
Right.
Like, that's a very weird conundrum to like be in. Like,
was there ever hope though, for even just for your kids, that he would get out?
There was constant hope that the appeal process was going to go through. That there was always this like, he might come through.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I was on a date with my husband now, and he said, what happens if your ex gets out of prison? And I said, I don't know. I'm somebody who's very honest, and like, I can't lie and say, oh, nothing's going to happen. Like, I don't know. I haven't been there. I didn't even mean that it was going to go somewhere. I just didn't know.
Right.
And that really set us up for a really dismal first year of relationships. We actually got married 4 times. It was awful. It was awful.
To each other. 4 times to
each other.
Yes.
And it kind of diminished. So the first time we were like in a chapel, and like I had a cute dress, and all my kids are standing there. I have a picture, all of them. My oldest son's playing the piano, and they're all crying. All of them tears. They wanted their dad.
Yeah.
Realistically, in hindsight, I should have waited. I shouldn't have dated anybody. I should have just like let it be. But I was desperate to have help with these kids.
Right.
I was desperate. And so we got married the first time, and after about just a few days, it was quite a disaster. It just wasn't working out. So we got an annulment. We got married again in a few months. We got an annulment. We got married a few months later, got a divorce.
Thankfully, you're in Vegas, and divorces can just happen like that.
They can, but also, and I find this with my adult children, we also have 10 children together. We didn't mention that. So I had 6 children. He had 3 boys. We got married, and we have 1 there, ours. So my youngest has 9 half siblings. So he's got his people in his corner, his family. I've got my people in my corner. I'm telling my story to my people. He's telling his story to his people. And it's just a complete disaster. But one thing I knew is that I was supposed to be with him, however that looked, and whatever we had to do to get through it. So some people say like doing something over and over again that doesn't work is insanity.
Right.
It was my sanity. We just had to go through this process. And one thing I've learned with all of this as well is it's a concept I teach in kindergarten a lot, because I did end up teaching school, but you can't go under it. You can't go over it. You can't go around it. You just have to go through it, right?
The Bear Hunt book, right?
The Bear Hunt book.
Yes.
So what actually made and solidified this last marriage was I got into a home. I was in a car accident and had a payout, and my parents helped me, and I was able to buy a small home. And it was the last chance, and he says, can I help you remodel it? I'm like, you're not getting back in here with me. Like 2 days later, I was in tennis shoes and a sports bra and running shorts, and we were at a the little church. And the guy goes, haven't you guys been here before? I'm like, actually, we've been here like 3 times.
Very acquainted.
We went to a counselor and to a therapist. He was religious, but not the member of our church. And he basically finally called me out on my crap.
Really?
Because I was horrible to him. I was so afraid of letting go of these little crumbs. I was afraid of letting go of my food stamps. I was afraid of letting go of my ward that had kind of buoyed me up. I was afraid of letting go of my family support. I was going to have to rely on somebody else who I've only known really like a year to carry me, these 6 kids, and step forward into that new life. And so basically he called me out, said, you're being a total jerk to this poor man. It was mostly my fault, and I 100% take accountability.
But it makes all the sense to me because of what you kept losing all along the way. You kept losing so many things. And so what if they're monetary, items? They're still things
you
that
have
were
to
yours.
eat.
Yes. And it's a security thing. It makes all the sense in the world to me. So
yeah. So it was, and it wasn't even like the clothes or the hairdresser. It's like, how am I going to feed these kids? How am I going to have enough gas to get them to school?
Have a roof over their head. I mean, yes.
So we ended up with a therapist. He called me out on my shiz, basically, and we moved into a new space.
Together. Yep.
And after that one therapy session, I've never gone to therapy again. He's never gone to therapy again.
Really?
And our marriage has been delightful.
seriously, though, you guys are like a poster, a model of what a good marriage looks like. I mean, you blended a big family. That in and of itself can destroy
It's
a marriage.
very difficult. His boys were always very accepting. My kids were very difficult, highly difficult. They were, especially my girls. So he had 3 boys. I have 4 girls and 2 sons at the time. And it was very, very difficult. They were so hard on him. They were so mean to him. They were snotty. They were sarcastic. They were cutting themselves. They were getting pregnant. They were doing all the things that teenage girls do to lash out.
Right.
So everything that could happen, even after we were married, were still happening. So one thing I've also learned is like, you're never immune from the hard things.
No.
So I thought, oh, this is the hardest thing I'll ever do. Well, the hard things just keep coming, right?
They do.
So he hadn't been super active in the church, and that was one of my requirements. You have to be active in the church. He had started to get reactivated, and he's never looked back since. He's one of the best, the most amazing. I cannot say enough good things. One thing that we've really cultivated in our home is this home of gathering. I have Sunday dinner for all our kids. It's usually between 25 and 30 people on every other Sunday. And it's funny, if I cancel it, I hear from all of them. They're so mad. Like they really, thrive on these dinners and this family that we've created.
That tradition too, like all of it. And there is such an amazing feeling anytime, like when you offered for us to come and stay this weekend, I was like, yes, because, well, not this weekend, whatever day it is, but it just, you just feel good here. It's the spirit is here for sure. You have such a great, what you've created with Stephen is amazing. And the fact that you came, like, I feel like you came full circle. I mean, you don't not have hard things go on, but you definitely learned a lot from each thing. I'm sure you're just stronger and stronger and stronger. And I mean, this girl can run circles around most of us on any given topic or event or experience. Honestly, it's amazing. So where are you? How did you feel like you grew spiritually from that whole experience? I mean, yes, you continue to have more, but
at that point we had remarried, or for the last time. I remembered that I have a school teaching degree, and so I started teaching kindergarten. And
that is a saint right there.
We were just starting to recover. During that whole time, there were just blessing after blessing after blessing. And one thing I really feel at this point is I can never deny the miracles that I've seen in my life. There's not even words you can put to them. Stephen was completely prepared for me and my children. After I had taught for about a year, I was pregnant again. That was a real, I thought I was done with that, but what a blessing that little boy has been. Mm-hmm. He was able to bring 9 other people together, and we created this family mostly because of that child. Right. So I quit working. My children were aging up now. They're starting to get married. They struggled with trauma and lots of issues because of from having a parent incarcerated.
Sure. Yeah.
And like I said, I had a daughter get pregnant right out of high school. I've had lots of psychological issues. My sons have struggled. During this time, one of my sons had been playing with fireworks, and he blew almost his whole hand off. And so, we were dealing with that. And every hardship that happened, Stephen and I became closer, and my faith just continued to grow. So fast forward to about 3 years ago, my ex-husband had served for 13 and a half years. And through my children's tennis foundation, there was the man that runs it. And he had seen these letters from my children's father coming through on his fax machine. My kids spent a lot of time. And he's like, I wonder if we can help this guy get out. And him and I had retained a really good relationship. It was very mutual. My ex-husband had a lot of respect for my husband that I have now. The kids started respecting Stephen more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And through this foundation, through a famous singer, and through the President Trump's daughter, he was able to be have a sentence commuted. And so that was a really interesting event full of miracle after miracle. And how hard, if anybody's ever looked into how to commute somebody's sentence, it doesn't happen.
Especially in federal prison.
It's zero. I mean, it costs millions of dollars. And it was just through this series of events. I mean, you could do a whole podcast just on that. It was the news. It was all of those things. And during that time as well, I had been on Dr. Phil's show. I had been interviewed.
I went to the audience for that. Anyway,
Phil.
Yes.
You never actually do anything with Dr. Phil. But I had, it was because this was public. I had been Mrs. Nevada. I had all these children. We were just kind of these public event people that were happening. And we also filmed a reality show during that time for Broadway.
That's right.
So it was called Everybody Loves Julie. I had a producer reach out and they said, we want to find people in the LDS church that have criminal type of histories. And I gave them some names to interview. They called me back and they said, nobody will really talk to us. They just want to ask their husbands permission about everything. And I said, yeah, you're not going to find anybody that will talk to you, but I will. So they actually, after about a year of interviewing, they came out and they shot a reality show and it did not get picked up, but it was really fun to shoot. And we have a really fun little video and everything. Wow. And Stephen, my husband's now, his ex-wife is involved and my ex-husband would call in from prison and we had all of these very working parts going at one time. It's really fun to do.
That's so neat. Okay, I have to go back a tiny bit. You said that your kids really struggled with having a parent incarcerated. Do you feel like it's fair for me to say that maybe both of their parents were incarcerated in a way, like the way that you felt like neglectful and you, I mean, just keeping yourself afloat, like in a way?
So one thing that I saw was I had a lot of my kids blamed me for everything because their dad's put away, right? So he's here, I'm doing all the things and I'm the one getting blamed for any misdeeds, any discomfort that they feel, right? My oldest son said when his father was released from prison, he said, it feels like I was released from prison too. Wow. So these kids have been carrying this around every Christmas, every Easter, every holiday, every spring break. My kids are at a federal prison and it is no fun. It is no fun. They're in the long car rides. They had several incidents with bed bugs being eaten alive by bed bugs. Oh, they're sitting in a federal prison for 2 to 3 days with other inmates. The guards are mean. They're very mean. And these are little children. Like it's not a conducive place for families, obviously.
Right.
And so it was so hard for kids to kind of wrap their head around that. And every holiday, that's where it's spent. So it's a burden on them. And
for sure,
it's okay for kids to go through hard things. That's fine. And yes, my older kids had a lot of responsibility and whatnot, but that's just what happens when you have a big family. For me, that's what happens. But they had a lot of undue burden. And one thing that happened that was definitely a miracle. So the morning he was supposed to get out of prison, they're all waiting by the phone and President Trump's getting out of office that day. So Ivanka Trump is supposed to call. It's like 7 a.m. They wait all day long. And they're getting word that other people are getting commuted. And so it's about 9 p.m. Vegas time. So it's in Washington, D.C. It's midnight on the last day of his.
Right.
And they're just like, it's not going to happen. And at midnight D.C. time, Ivanka Trump calls them and says, my dad just commuted your dad's sentence. Go get him.
No way.
And it still took days. We put him on a bus. And it's just funny. Like I have this sweetest husband now who's like, how are they going to get there? I'll give them gas money to go pick up their dad, you know? So they go pick up their dad. They bring him home. And we had a lot of press and there was a lot going. And post-incarceration is equally as difficult, but I wouldn't have known that. So I have not seen this man for probably 12 years. Steven's never met this man. My kids, my youngest didn't even remember him out of prison. She does that thing where she'll say she remembers something, but it's based off someone else's memory.
Right, a memory,
I don't know what that's called.
I don't either.
So over the last 3 years, we've had to deal with post-incarceration. And that's been a very unique and untalked about kind of an epidemic, I guess you could say.
Can you talk about it a little bit?
I mean, it's just so when somebody's been incarcerated for that many years, there's a lot of things like when he went away, there weren't cell phones to do. There was flip phones, like things like technology has changed. Now he's a felon. My kids are trying, they consider their stepdad, their father, in the sense of that's who's raised them. That's who's bought their prom dresses. That's who's walked them down the aisle. Right. So now they're introduced to this new man that they don't really know outside of prison.
Right.
And they have to try to have a relationship. And that has been very difficult. They're adults. He remarried very quickly. He's had 2 more children since then. So there's a lot of feelings. Yeah. It's just very difficult to have this relationship. But the blessing in it is they love and respect Stephen so much now. Mm-hmm. And they've all said, I'm so sorry we blamed you for anything. We see now. We see all the things. And so that's been the silver lining.
Yeah.
In it.
Like they had to grow up and mature and be able to I don't know, wrap their head around some of those adult things.
Yes.
Sure.
And now they're saying now that they're adults and starting to have children, they're like, oh my gosh, Stephen paid for our whole life.
Right.
He dealt with all the hard things. He's the one that's really, put the blood, sweat, and tears into raising these children.
Right. Oh my goodness. That is such a good story. So do you have anything that, you already said so many great things. Like I normally have my notes and I take notes what people say, but you talked about always showing up. I love that. You talked about you got to go through it. What do you have anything else that you feel like could be just, a help to somebody else that may go through something similar or just have some of the similar, emotions and feelings that you have had?
Yes. I think the biggest thing, and one thing I really notice, I do have my own business now, and I'm on a lot of Facebook groups for moms, their young mom groups. And I just notice how people just need a little bit of encouragement. So somebody will post, I'm having the hardest day. My baby's teething. I don't have a car. We're 3 months behind on rent. And sometimes just saying, you know what? I've been there. You're going to get through it. I lived through it. Yeah. And it's amazing that little bit of encouragement, goes a long way. The things that happen to you don't necessarily matter. It's what you do with them that's important. I could have curled up and died. There was many days I didn't want to live. The name of my book is called For the Sake of My Children. That's why I got up every day, because it's not their fault that their dad went to prison and their mom's a hot mess. That's not their fault.
Right.
So I had to get up every single day and continue to encourage and push. And it was hard and there was trauma and all the things, but it doesn't define who they will be as adults. And it doesn't define me as who I am today. I am thriving. My family's thriving. And so I think no matter how dark it is or how far down, there's always people who are willing to help you. And when people don't have a community, I find that's another really horrible thing about our society right now. Mm-hmm. Everyone sits on their phones. They're all searching for community. I need friends. Right. I need a group. Do any of you guys like to drink coffee in the morning? Mm-hmm. Where can I take my kids for good interaction? Go join a church. I don't care if it's the LDS church. I don't care if it's a Catholic church. Go join a church. They all
have something.
And find an organization. Yeah. Your kids need to go to church.
Right.
I don't care who, and yes, you force them.
Yeah. Right.
Until they're 18.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are some things I've learned. It just, your past doesn't define you. And that's not who you have to be. It is not. And I also believe it's really important to talk about these things, to talk about death of your child, to talk about incarceration of your ex-husband. Do you think it's fun when somebody meets me and they know my ex-husband?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
It's important to share your story because answered prayers only come through other people. Almost always. Maybe not only, but almost always.
Yeah.
I pray for help and somebody comes and cleans my house.
And you let them. That's the thing.
You have to let people serve
I think
you.
That's the key, is that we're always like, no, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm good. But I think you're taking away from their experience too, to be able to help.
Yes. Right? And in this day and age, things don't go away. So what was on the internet in 2006 is still on the internet. Right. I'm still defending these things. I'm still having credit issues. I'm still having federal documents sent and I have to reach out to an attorney. So there's all that. I'm still trying to find this relationship fix between my ex-husband and we're reasonable and everybody gets along fine.
Right.
But it doesn't stop just because you get a little headway. So, I really enjoy Jordan Peterson. And one thing he really always says is just aim up, right? Do service for somebody. If you're having a horrible day, serve somebody.
I agree.
Right. So right now in my church, I'm the compassionate service or the service coordinator.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because I have a very tough love personality, but I find joy in serving others. I do. And I also find joy in having solutions for others. So sometimes it's encouragement, but sometimes people need a solution.
Right.
To help. Like,
Yes.
okay, what can we do to fix this so we don't have to take you somewhere every day?
Right.
Whatever.
Yes.
And so my hope is that my children will continue to thrive. I've noticed that my older kids have more trauma than my younger kids because they remember him more.
Mm-hmm.
And they went through this heartache for so many years. Yeah. And that they will continue to thrive, serve, have children, all of those things, and just use this to help other people. If we don't have hardships, we can't help others.
Exactly.
And we have to talk about it.
I love that. That's so true. That's so good. That's a great takeaway, and that's a great place to leave off unless you have anything else. I so appreciate.
I don't. And just don't sign anything unless you read it.
I love that. Yep. That's another little tip that you left us. So, okay. Well,
and one other thing.
Yes.
I've often had people say they don't want to get divorced or move forward because they're afraid it's going to be worse. Right? So,
yes.
Life, I thought I had a perfect marriage. I thought I had it all. And what I realized is I was living on crumbs. And Heavenly Father, God, wanted me to thrive. And he gave me a feast. But I had to step forward in faith. I had to let go of my crumbs so that I could cook that feast, so that feast would be available to me. But if without letting go and taking that step in faith, nothing can happen.
I love that. And tell us about your book. When can people get it? Where can they get it? How do we get it?
It's just sitting in my drawer. It's finished. It's been edited. It's ready to go. I'll probably self-publish at some point. My mother's almost 90, and there's some things in there that might really upset her, so I might wait.
I see. Okay.
Until we're done with that.
Okay.
It has to feel right.
Right.
It has to be the right time, and I'll know
sense.
when that time is.
Okay.
And when that time is, it will happen. I've sent it to several publishers. They're like, oh, it's got, a lot of people don't like Donald Trump. A lot of people don't like that I'm a godly woman.
Right.
Like, people don't like that.
Right.
And so it has to be the right time in the right place. And when it's supposed to happen, it will. It will surge forward. And I've just found that when things are supposed to happen, they do.
That's faith,
They happen.
right? That is faith for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. We're going to sign off. Thank you so much. Okay.
Hey listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you felt encouraged and gained some insight. If you want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to check out the website at pieces2peace.net. If you or someone you know has a story you'd like to share, send an email to heatherstephen@pieces2peace.net. Until next time, keep moving forward.